Some battles have no winners or losers, only shattered souls, and I once fought in such a battle, a war against myself for a girl. In the end, I didn't lose her because I stopped loving her, but because I was no longer allowed to love her. Hey everyone, how are you all doing these days? Is work going well? I hope everything's smooth sailing and you're living true to yourselves. Today I want to tell you a story, a lesson I paid for with a piece of my soul. It's not a story about betrayal or deceit, but about sacrifice, about the thin line between love and losing yourself. This is the story of Layla, the girl I once loved more than life itself, and how a love that seemed unbreakable fell apart not because we stopped loving each other, but because I was no longer me, no longer the person allowed to love her the way she wanted and her family accepted. I want to tell you this story because who knows? Maybe somewhere out there are others facing a difficult choice to keep love or to keep themselves. I hope that from my story you can find a whisper, a warning, so you don't have to follow the same path I did. Please listen and reflect. It all started with a first glance, with a radiant smile and an invisible line I tried to cross but ultimately pushed me away. I still remember vividly the first day I met Layla. It was a spring afternoon in Los Angeles. The sky was clear blue, the sun a gentle golden, and the whole city seemed to be rejoicing at an outdoor concert. I was standing in the crowd swaying to the music when my eyes met hers. She was wearing a wide-brimmed cream hat, and beneath it a smile as radiant as the morning sun, exuding a fresh, vibrant energy. She was laughing and talking with her friends, her chestnut brown hair gently blowing in the wind, and I swear I couldn't take my eyes off her. There was something about Layla, a special aura that made me feel like the entire world around me suddenly grew quiet, leaving only her and me. From that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. I don't know how I dared, but I bravely walked over to talk to her. We talked about everything under the sun, from our favorite bands and good movies to simple dreams of a bright future. Everything just flowed naturally, as if we had known each other for a very long time. Layla had a free spirit, a warm heart, and a sharp mind. She was intelligent, funny, and always knew how to make me feel special. I felt like I had found the missing piece of my life. We fell in love quickly, an intense and passionate love like a blazing fire in the dark of night. We spent almost all our time together, strolling on Santa Monica Beach at sunset, driving along the Pacific Coast Highway, gazing at the vast ocean, or simply sitting for hours in a small cafe in West Hollywood, talking about anything and everything. We talked about the future, about a small house with a garden, about children, and about traveling around the world. There wasn't a single doubt about our future. Everything seemed perfectly aligned. But then the day Layla said, "Honey, will you come have dinner with my family this weekend?" I knew something was about to change. I was so excited, both eager and a little nervous. I was prepared to make the best impression on her parents. I bought a beautiful bouquet of lilacs for her mom and chose the finest bottle of red wine for her dad. Layla's family lived in a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood with a charming little garden full of flowers. They welcomed me warmly, very friendly and open. Her father was a calm, kind man. Her mother was graceful and gentle. Layla's sisters were cheerful and lively. Dinner was delightful. We laughed and chatted, the atmosphere as warm as a family. But then as the conversation shifted to life and values, her mother asked me, "Do you go to church, son?" I paused slightly. I honestly replied, "No, ma'am, I don't go to church. I believe in kindness and karma, in the good things in life, but I don't follow any specific religion." I thought it was a simple, sincere answer, but I was wrong. Her mother just smiled. A very slight, graceful smile, but that smile made me feel like something was off. It wasn't a smile of acceptance or understanding. It was more like a smile hiding a judgment, an invisible reminder making me feel like I needed to adjust myself a bit. It wasn't a direct statement, but her eyes and that smile drew a first invisible line that I deliberately ignored. I thought our love was strong enough to overcome any barrier, even a barrier of belief. I was too confident, too naive, and I didn't know that this very smile, this invisible line, would be the starting point for a series of compromises that I would pay for with my entire being. Layla's mother's smile haunted me. I began to wonder if I truly fit into her family, if my lack of religious affiliation was a big problem. I didn't want anything to affect our love. And so I decided I would try. I started going to church with Layla. Their church was grand, with ancient, solemn architecture, located in a quiet, tree-lined residential area. Every Sunday morning, I'd put on my best clothes and go there with Layla. Not because I believed in the sermons and the hymns, but because I loved her. I loved the way she sat there, eyes closed, lips gently moving in prayer, her face radiant with a peace, a serenity I had never seen anywhere else. I wanted to be a part of that peace, that world of hers. I tried to memorize the hymns, tried to sing along, though my voice was off key. I tried to sit still during the long drawn-out services, trying not to frown when the preacher kept repeating that, outside of faith, everything is meaningless, or those without God will be lost in life. Hearing those words, I felt uncomfortable, felt like I was being judged, looked down upon. But I still tried to hold it in, just to make Layla happy. She would squeeze my hand under the pew, occasionally turn and smile encouragingly, and that made all my efforts feel worthwhile. Initially, Layla said, "Just having you come with me is enough." She said she appreciated my effort, appreciated that I wanted to integrate with her family. I thought that's fine, I had done it. But over time, the phrase "come with me" was no longer enough. It was like something that kept growing inside Layla, or perhaps inside her family, that gradually she too was influenced. After a few months, Layla began gently suggesting that I should delve deeper into the faith, that maybe you'll find peace there. Then she wanted me to be baptized. "Honey, if we're baptized, we'll be blessed by God, our family will be more complete. I want our children to grow up in God's embrace." Her voice was so earnest, her eyes full of hope, that I couldn't bear to refuse. I hesitated. Baptism. That meant I had to officially renounce what I had believed, or at least accept a belief that wasn't my own. I remembered my father's words, "Live true to yourself, son." But then, looking into Layla's eyes, seeing her desire to have me be a complete part of her world, I nodded again. "Okay, I'll do it." After that came the premarital catechism classes. Classes where I had to sit and listen about the history of the denomination, about the commandments, about the rules for living. I tried to memorize, tried to understand, but honestly my mind was always spinning, and those things felt so alien to me. I felt like I was an actor having to memorize a script that wasn't mine, playing a role that didn't belong to me. And finally, the heaviest thing, Layla wanted me to promise to raise our children according to her family's faith. "Honey, I want our children to grow up in God's embrace, to understand the values I've been taught since childhood." She said that, and I, because of love, agreed again. I promised to take our children to church every Sunday, to teach them the Bible, to send them to a church school if possible. I agreed. I agreed to everything. For love. I told myself as long as Layla was happy, it was enough. Little did I know, my unconditional yes, my sacrificing myself, would become the very thing that gnawed at me from within. Each time I nodded, each time I said yes to things that weren't truly mine, I was stepping outside the bounds of my true self. I traded my authenticity for love, and I didn't know that this trade over time would make me cease to be me, and ultimately would make me lose the very love I tried so hard to hold on to. I felt like a stranger in my own life in this very relationship. Our wedding day was a beautiful, dreamlike summer day. The grand church, with its stained glass windows sparkling with light, was filled with hymns and the scent of fresh white lilies. I wore a sharp black suit, stood before the pastor, and made vows before a faith that was not my own. Every word of the vow I tried to articulate, clearly tried to show sincerity, but deep down I felt a strange emptiness. "May God bless this marriage. We promised to live according to God's word." Each word, each phrase felt like a cut to my soul. I looked at Layla. She was beautiful in her pristine white wedding dress, her smile radiant like an angel. Her eyes sparkled with happiness, faith, and reassurance. Seeing me standing beside her, entering her world with her. In that moment, I didn't feel like I was betraying myself. At that time, I simply thought, as long as Layla is happy, her happiness was all I wished for. I thought that my making peace with her family's beliefs, my willingness to step into her world, was an expression of great love, a sweet sacrifice for the one I loved. But from that day on, I gradually felt like I was living under false pretenses. Our married life fundamentally was still happy. Layla was still the gentle, thoughtful girl I loved. We still had romantic evenings, distant trips, and moments of joyful laughter. But increasingly, the shell of faith I had put on became heavier. Our lives gradually became shaped by the rules, rituals, and habits of the denomination I had promised to follow. I had to teach my son the Bible instead of reading fairy tales as I had dreamed. Our first son, David, grew up in an environment where faith was at the center of everything. I had to sit there, read stories I didn't truly believe, had to explain things I didn't truly understand to a child I loved more than life itself. I had to diet according to holiday seasons, had to abstain from favorite foods, and awkwardly explain those rules to friends and colleagues. I had to ask permission to attend rituals I didn't understand, such as special prayers in the middle of the week or in-depth Bible studies. And worst of all, I had to do all of it as if I believed it was true. I had to nod, to smile, to pretend to agree with things that deep down I didn't feel. I felt like I was performing a grand play, a play where the audience was my wife's family, my new friends at church, the people I needed to fit in with. I felt like I was deceiving myself, deceiving Layla, and deceiving my own children. I was no longer a man free in his thoughts, in his beliefs. I became an acceptable version of myself. a version that had been trimmed and molded to fit a framework that was not my own. This living a lie was what began to gnaw at me from within. It didn't erupt into outward conflict, but it silently eroded my spirit, leaving me feeling empty, lonely even when I was beside the person I loved. I realized the price of compromising myself to hold on to love was too high. I thought I was sacrificing for love, but in reality I was killing my own self, and that in the long run would never bring true happiness to anyone. I became a stranger in my own home, in my own marriage, and I knew that feeling of alienation was slowly pushing me away from Layla, even though I didn't want it to. The perfect religious husband facade I tried to maintain gradually became too much to bear. I truly tried very hard. I attended every service, every activity, even tried to contribute ideas in Bible study discussions. But inside, a part of my soul screamed that this was not where I belonged, this was not the life I wanted to live. Layla still loved me. I knew that. She still cared for me diligently, still loved me unconditionally, but she didn't look at me the same way anymore. The eyes that once sparkled with faith and admiration were now frequently replaced by disappointment. She started to be disappointed when I didn't spontaneously pray at every meal, or when I just mumbled a few words instead of reading the Bible aloud clearly. She was disappointed when I sighed every time there was an announcement about a special service or a church gathering. She noticed my reluctance no matter how hard I tried to hide it, and I started to avoid. That was the only way I knew not to face her disappointed gaze, not to face the feeling of betraying myself every day. I used work as an excuse. I have to stay late at the office. I have an urgent meeting. I need to go on a business trip for a few days. I took on more projects, worked late into the night, trying to keep myself busy enough not to have time to think or feel empty. I no longer had dinner with her family every Sunday, something I used to try to maintain. I no longer went to church regularly. My absences grew more frequent. Layla didn't say anything. Her family didn't say anything either. But I knew they all noticed. I saw her mother's gaze, her gentle eyes full of scrutiny and regret. I saw Layla become quieter, her smile less frequent, and she often sat staring out the window as if thinking about something far away. We didn't argue. There were no loud fights, no hurtful words. But between us, a deadly silence had replaced all honest conversation. We still talked, but only superficial questions about work, about the kids, about small daily things. No more deep sharing about emotions, about fears, about the pressures we were both enduring. I didn't say that I was slowly dying inside this shell. I didn't say that I felt I was no longer me, that I missed my old, free, spontaneous self. And Layla also didn't say how disappointed she was to see me slowly retreating from her world, how afraid she was at the thought of us no longer sharing the same faith. This silence gnawed at our happiness. It was worse than any argument. At least when people argue, they can express emotions, they still have a chance to resolve problems. But silence, it's like an invisible wall constantly growing taller, separating us from each other, making us feel lonely even when we were together. I realized I had tried to hold on to love by losing myself, but the price was a loss of connection, a crack in my own heart and in Layla's heart. We were still together, but I was no longer allowed to love her completely because I was no longer completely myself. The silence grew like an abyss, swallowing everything good between us. The more I avoided, the more distant Layla became. She still loved me, but I could feel a profound sadness in her eyes every time I avoided going to church or when I gave vague answers to the theological questions our son asked. She no longer reminded me to attend services, no longer tried to draw me into church community activities. Everything became cold-strained. We lived together, but like polite roommates maintaining distance. I knew sooner or later this had to end. The internal pressure, the feeling of living a lie every day, it was killing me. I was no longer the cheerful, confident, free-spirited man Layla once loved. I was just a shadow, a distorted version, having lost myself. One evening after David had fallen asleep, Layla sat down beside me on the living room sofa. The air was heavy. I felt my heart pounding, knowing an important conversation was about to happen, one that could change everything. She looked at me, her eyes full of sadness but also full of understanding. Her voice was soft, slow, as if weighing every word, but sharp, cold, and piercing, right into my heart. I looked at Layla. Her face was more tired than I thought, and her eyes no longer sparkled with the vibrancy they had on the day we first met. Perhaps throughout that time it wasn't just me suffering. Layla too was carrying an invisible pressure, a burden I had been too oblivious to notice. I could clearly see the internal struggle within her between her love for me and her loyalty to her faith, to her family. Her mother, whom I had once thought only smiled gently, now stood as a solid wall, an invisible barrier that Layla, however much she wished, could not overcome. Perhaps she had tried to persuade her family, tried to reconcile me with their beliefs, but it was all in vain. Her gaze now was not only disappointment in me, but also the despair of a child who could not go against her parents' wishes, could not break traditions ingrained in her very being. All the church's commandments that marriage must be united in God must have also weighed heavily on her mind. The fear of becoming a lost soul in the eyes of the community, in the eyes of her loved ones, probably exhausted her. I wondered how many nights she had spent sleepless, how many tears she had shed in silence, only to come to this cruel decision. I understood then. She was also suffering perhaps even more than me because she had to choose between the two things she loved most, me and the faith that had nurtured her since childhood. I never wanted you to change. Truly never. I loved who you were. I loved your free spirit. I even loved what you believed in. But I can't live with the feeling that I'm pulling you away from yourself anymore. I see you're tired, you're forcing yourself. I see you're not you anymore. And that, it breaks my heart more than anything. My heart instantly constricted. My whole body felt frozen. I looked at her wanting to say that I still loved her, that I would try again, that I would do anything to keep her. I wanted to say, I'll go to church again, I'll study the Bible again, I'll try to fit in again. I wanted to say, just to be with you, I accept everything. But then another thought flashed through my mind, sharp and cruel as a blade. I knew, if I tried again, I would only be an empty shell of a good husband, a hollow figure with nothing real inside. I would no longer be the man with his own beliefs, his own opinions, his own free spirit. I would just be a version accepted by society, accepted by my wife's family, but not truly myself. I would no longer be me, and that in the long run would kill the love we once had even more painfully. I remained silent, a silence that stretched on endlessly. I looked deep into her eyes, and in them I saw understanding sadness and even a hint of relief. She understood too. She also knew I couldn't keep up the charade anymore. We should stop, honey, Layla said softly, almost a sigh. We broke up in silence. No tears, no accusations, just two people, stopping before becoming enemies, before the forced pretense turned love into hatred, beautiful memories into haunting obsessions. We no longer embraced, no longer said goodbye. We just looked at each other, a final look filled with pain and regret. Then each turned away. In that moment, I knew I had lost Layla, not because we stopped loving each other, but because we had reached a crossroads where love was no longer strong enough to hold us together. The final truth was revealed, a cruel and painful one. Layla never wanted me to change, but her family and their unshakable foundation of faith had unknowingly placed an enormous burden on me. She realized I was losing myself, and she chose to let go, not because she stopped loving me, but because she wanted to free me and free herself from that immense pressure. She loved me enough not to want to see me suffer, not to want to see me turn into someone else, and I also loved her enough that I couldn't continue this charade anymore. We couldn't hold on to each other because the cost of sacrificing oneself was too great, greater than the love we had for each other. Sometimes love isn't everything, especially when it demands you give up who you are. After we broke up, it took me a long time to redefine my life, to find myself again. The house became empty, cold. No more Layla's laughter, no more forced church visits, no more silent arguments in my mind about right and wrong, about faith and authenticity. I felt as if I had undergone a major surgery, removing an important part of my body, but at the same time removing a tumor that had been gnawing at me for so long. I started spending more time on myself. I went back to old hobbies, things I had set aside to fit in with my new life. I read books, listened to music I liked, went hiking alone in national parks, breathing in the fresh mountain air, and felt a strange sense of peace. I no longer had to pretend to believe in something I didn't feel. I no longer had to try to please anyone. I returned to being me, the free-spirited, open-minded person who believed in human values, in kindness, and in karma without needing any dogma. David, my son, still lives with Layla and her family. We agreed to co-parent, and I still visit him regularly. Every time I look at him, I see Layla's reflection, and a sense of regret still lingers. I know this separation has hurt David, but I believe that in the long run, having two happy parents, even if not living together, is better than having two parents living in pretense and unhappiness. I will still teach him about good things, about morality, about love, about kindness, and I believe that is what matters most. Many nights I sit alone in my empty apartment looking out at the city. I think about Layla, about our love. I don't regret loving her, don't regret trying. I only regret not realizing sooner that there are some things that no matter how great the love cannot be changed. There are some boundaries, though invisible, that are too strong to cross. I realized the final and most painful truth was not that our faiths were different, but that I let love make me lose myself. I sacrificed too much to the point where I was no longer allowed to be fully present in that relationship. Layla loved me, but she loved an authentic man, not a fabricated version. And when I was no longer myself, I pushed myself out of her arms, out of the love I once tried to hold on to at all costs. Love sometimes isn't the answer to every problem, especially when it demands you give up your soul. Life after divorce isn't a straight path to peace. It's a bumpy road full of shattered pieces of the past unanswered questions. Every time I see David, my son, his clear eyes remind me of what was lost of a complete family we couldn't keep. He doesn't fully understand adult matters, but I know that his dad's absence at home is a big void in his tender soul. I try to spend more time with him, take him out, read to him, and try to make up for it in every way I can. I want him to understand that even if his parents no longer live together, the love for him will never change. I started seeking help from a therapist. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a warm voice. She listened as I told my story about my internal struggles, about the pain of losing Layla, and about the feeling of being lost when living a life that wasn't my own. She didn't judge, just listened and helped me untangle each knot in my heart. She helped me realize that sacrificing oneself to the point of losing oneself isn't a display of great love, but an act of self-destruction. True love should be a place where both people can be themselves, grow together, not where one person has to become a copy of the other, she said. Those words were like a ray of light tearing through the darkness in my mind. Gradually, I learned to accept that there are some things I cannot change, some boundaries I cannot cross, to accept that love, no matter how strong, cannot mend every difference, especially differences in core beliefs and values. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, for my weakness in not being strong enough to stand firm from the beginning. I also learned to forgive Layla and her family because I understood that they also only wanted what they believed was best. I returned to my travels. I hiked trails in Yosemite, breathed in the fresh mountain air, and felt my soul cleansed. I gazed at the stars in the night sky in Joshua Tree and felt tiny before the vast universe, yet so free. I realized that peace doesn't come from conforming to a certain framework, but from connecting with myself, with the values I believe in, with the things that make me feel truly me. I don't know if Layla found complete happiness with a man who shares her faith. I also don't know if I will find a new love where I can truly be myself. But I know one thing for sure: I will never compromise my true self again. I will never allow myself to live under someone else's name, someone else's belief. I will live true to myself, to what I believe in, and if love comes, it will have to accept the real me with all that I am and am not. I still remember Layla's first glance, her radiant smile. It's a beautiful memory, an indispensable part of my life. But I also remember the feeling of losing myself, the feeling of being shut out in my own life. And that lesson, that pain, has helped me grow so much. It taught me that love is truly complete only when you don't have to sacrifice yourself to get it. This is my story. A story about choice, about compromise, and about the journey of finding myself again. I hope that by sharing this story, I can help someone out there avoid making my mistakes, avoid experiencing the pain I once tasted. If you are listening to this, and you are having to choose between love and yourself, between keeping the one you love and keeping your true self, your core values, I don't have the right answer for you. Every person, every situation is different, but I have a whisper, a plea from the bottom of a man's heart who has walked that path, who has paid with his own life. True love doesn't demand you kill yourself to exist. If that love requires you to abandon your beliefs, to cast aside your core values, to live a life that isn't yours, then is that still true love? A meaningful love should be a place where you can be your most complete self, where you are accepted for all that you are, not a place where you have to transform into someone else to please your partner. If you keep trying to mold yourself to fit a template that isn't yours, one day, you'll realize you're living someone else's life, and then you'll lose yourself and the love you tried so hard to hold on to. And true faith doesn't ask you to abandon your authenticity. If a belief demands that you be false to your own heart, that you live in a facade, then can that faith truly bring peace? Authenticity with oneself is the foundation of all relationships, of all beliefs. When you lose that authenticity, you lose everything. True faith should be a source of strength, a beacon guiding your way, not a chain that binds and constrains your soul. Seek something that truly resonates with your spirit, something that brings inner peace, not an external imposition. I lost Layla, not because she was bad, not because she wasn't good, but because in our love, I was no longer allowed to be fully present. I was no longer the Ken of the past, of that first glance. I had become someone else, someone who no longer belonged to her world and no longer belonged to my own world. I sacrificed my true self, and the price was the shattering of a beautiful love. Don't repeat my mistakes. Be brave enough to live true to yourself, because only when you are truly you can you find true love, a love that accepts you completely and unconditionally. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to my story. This has been a challenging journey, a lesson I'll never forget. I truly hope that from what I've experienced, you can find a new perspective, some heartfelt advice for the difficult choices in your own lives. If you found this story meaningful, if it touched your heart, please take a moment to leave a comment down below. Share your thoughts or even your own story if you've ever faced similar choices between love and your true self. Every share, every word of encouragement is invaluable energy, helping us feel less alone on our journey to find happiness and authenticity. Don't forget to share this video with anyone you think needs to hear it. Maybe someone out there desperately needs this warning, needs a wake-up call to realize the value of living true to themselves before it's too late, before they lose their true self and genuine love. And if you want to support the channel, if you want to hear more emotional, meaningful stories and other life lessons, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a huge motivation for me to continue sharing authentic stories from life stories that can touch hearts and change lives. Thank you all very much.